Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. We're all waiting for 5.5. You're just watching this to kill time the Monday before, so I guess I'll just get to the questions, even though I could probably ramble on and you'd be like, no, please, just I need to get through this day faster and this just wastes my time just enough. Please, just waste a little bit more. That's fine. That's the extra wasting time is the little rant right there. Yeah, we got 5.5 coming this week. There's a few other things I do want to talk about on the video, but they may come up in the questions or whatnot. So if I don't mention them here at the beginning, maybe I'll mention them at the end. But with that, thank you to our sponsors over on Patreon for supporting our channel. It's completely optional. There's no extra content for being over there. And I'm just glad to be able to bring content to you here on YouTube for free, as I always have. So thank you to those who are supporting over there, because I don't know why you are, but you're awesome. Thank you to our patrons of darkness, Khuja on Jenova and Kurenai Oni, who have gone above and beyond with their support on the platform. Now with that, let's see what kind of questions we got this week, shall we? Because I am very tired. First question, hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays. I like using the whole thing as one instead of doing both. Well, Mrhaps have a bonus of some. You didn't say hello. Well met, I guess, is kind of a hello. Yeah, that's a hello. Yeah, no, you said hello. There you go. See, yeah, you did. But here's one anyway. Hope you can forgive me as I said. There, see? Yeah, well met is not something I'm used to hearing as a greeting. But it is. It is indeed a greeting. So I can see. I don't blame you. I blame me. If I've understood it correctly, crit is a busted stat right now, or always has been, as it boosts damage in two ways, the rate and the damage. I was wondering what they could do to fix it. Make it two different stats. I mean, that doesn't actually fix the problem. That just means that you want crit rate up to a certain point, and then damage becomes the next stat. And it essentially dominates two different stat rolls instead of one. I think realistically, the only thing they can do with crit is to make some jobs work differently with specific stats. Like if you have abilities that scale off of specific stats, or you fundamentally design things to be more friendly to a stat like haste. It's a problem that's not all too uncommon with any sort of like looter or any game that has min-maxing of any degree. Maximizing on crit is always one of the biggest discussions in pretty much any game. Some classes across other games do a much better job of not relying on the stat by making things scale off of other things. You could do things like scaling off armor, or scaling off of damage reduction, or scaling off of total attack power. Those are things other games would probably do, but Final Fantasy XIV is pretty static with those numbers, so it wouldn't really make for much of an overall difference. I don't think the developers, which is the actual question, have they commented on this? I don't think they have. I think they've acknowledged crit is quite strong in the past and that it's problematic for some jobs and how reliant they can be on it. But they've removed the reliance of it on some jobs while also still just keeping it as strong as it always was. In fact, they got even stronger, even faster. Another way is to allow stats like determination, direct hit, to scale off, to scale exponentially as well. Determination, if determination gave you a flat boost based on your total damage bonus gained from determination, for example, then you'd have to weigh that versus just getting more crit rate, crit damage. But then everything's just racing to be. It's kind of like, so when a lot of people argue about Astro, when they talk about how they like to have all the choices with the cards before, as much as people will very often not acknowledge it, it was a race to get the balance almost every time. Every single decision you made on Astro could be quantified down to what would provide the most damage in any given situation. So for example, you'd see healers be like, oh, I loved giving the bolt to the tank and then just feeling comfortable throwing out a few more gravities. Okay, that's fine. So the goal of the bolt was not actually to protect the tank. It was to increase the comfort of which you could produce more DPS yourself. Or, you know, oh, I loved giving the arrow to a black mage, but the black mage does less damage overall with the arrow than it does with the balance. So it's basically that issue compounded on itself, but in stat form. And so it's just an issue where if you're just creating everything competing by making them all exponential, then you actually need to design things around benefiting, like jobs benefiting individually from those stats. So there's a few things they could absolutely do to make stats like tenacity, determination, skill speed, spell speed more attractive. Skill speed and spell speed being the toughest one because of people wanting to be at specific points in their rotation during burst windows, but there are ways to do it. It's just whether or not they ever will, whether they'll design jobs around that idea being something that is okay without being detrimental to taking some of these stats over other stats. So I agree. I would love to see more stat diversity, and I think we move further and further away from that, and I don't know that we'll see them move back in the opposite direction. I don't have the confidence in it. Here's a short one. Hashtag Mrhappy Monday. Just today, Monday. Hey there, Haps. Hey, quick question. What do you think will be the date for patch 5.55? So this question is a very simple answer. It's the last Tuesday of May. We already know late May, and that means last Tuesday of May. What is that, the 23rd? Where's my phone? I'll just pull up the calendar while making a point here. How do I put this? When you're someone like me who pays attention to like every microscopic detail that comes out about a game, and when someone asks a question like this, I very often have to rein myself in because I go, yeah, they said it was late May. I don't understand where is the confusion. And you have to remember that not everyone's as on top of it as you are, and you have to just answer it, like a human being, and just 25th. So the 25th, 23rd is a Sunday. I don't know why I thought that. Oh no, 23rd is something else for me. Yeah, the 25th of May is when it's going to be. That's late May. That's the last Tuesday of May. Then that's when it's going to be. I mean, let's just say it could be the 18th. It's technically late, second to last Tuesday. It's going to be the 25th. Every time they say late, it's the last Tuesday of the month. But yeah, that's a fun little thing. Whenever I answer questions like that, I'm always like, damn, but they said it was late. How do you not? And so that's just me being me. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Happy, quick question this week, and I have a bonus of patch 5.5 part 2 dropping one day after part 1. Actually, that would not be ideal for me. If it all dropped on the same day, that would be fantastic. One day later would actually be disadvantageous for me because I got some other things I got to do later in the week. But it would mean a lot more YouTube content. What character class content from a non-Final Fantasy RPG would you want incorporated in its own way into 14's world lore? I never think like that. I always want something to be contained within itself. I don't want to take a puzzle piece and figure out what parts I can cut out to make it fit in something else that I like. I never think that way. Now I'll answer a completely different question, and if I could pick a class from another MMO that I'd like to see represented in 14, Chloromancer from Rift. That's always been a long-time favorite of mine. I've often complimented that class and how it felt and the way that it functioned in Rift. And if you don't know, I would go check it out because it is a pretty cool class altogether. But for trying to force it into Final Fantasy XIV World Lore, I never find that prospect interesting. I like things to feel more organic than that, so I unfortunately don't have a sophisticated answer of any kind to the original question being presented. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hi, Hap. Hello. Hope your day has been treating you well so far. The fishing boats all suck today, but thanks for asking anyway. This may be my first question since Heavensward when you were using the one forum site for questions. Yeah, we don't use that anymore. I think I had spitballed Samurai into being split like Arcanist Scholar. Yeah, okay. I mean, I've gotten that question a handful of times because I obviously thought it was impossible we would get 2 DPS in Stormblood, so Samurai had to be a tank, and then they said it wasn't, and I was like, okay. Anyways, on to a couple questions. First, by now, patch notes out for 5.5. Something that excites you that you did not expect. What was it, though? Well, I mean, the ocean fishing stuff, we knew we were getting ocean fishing adjustments, but the way they described them in the live letter was just like, oh, we're going to be giving some more things for bonuses. And I'm just like, what does that mean? And then we saw seagulls and dolphins, and I'm like, yo, I'm working on my achievement right now, so I'm really glad. So that's definitely number one for me as like kind of the didn't really know what to expect option. Next question is related to your comments on Pagos. I wasn't playing during Mid-Stormblood when Eureka debuted, so I'm not aware what made Pagos so awful during its relevancy. Tried to progress through the storyline a couple patches ago, but stopped when I got to Pagos since I lost interest. I mean, then you don't even need me to explain it. You lost interest there naturally. Okay, so when Pagos first released, it had a number of issues. Now, most people will point to some of the more on-the-surface issues. The amount of levels you needed to teleport to each location on the map was a little too high, so it made getting around the map tedious. It made getting to notorious monsters to level much more difficult. And what generally became expected is that you would grind it like an old school RPG. But that last point leads to the actual most major issue I had with Pagos. It wasn't just that, it was tedious or it wasn't designed well and it took too long to get around. It was the prospect of grinding like an old school RPG. Now, I don't mind that. I play single player RPGs and old school RPGs, and I go crazy on grinding. I mean, I've made 3 Remas and 11 in the not so distant past at this point, almost 4. But this game is not built to do that. This is a game where you are frequently performing inputs. It is non-stop inputs. And the amount of progress you make per input in that specific scenario is very low. Because of chains, you can't really stop. As soon as you start a 30 chain, you're there. There's no taking a break. There's no AFK. There's no using the restroom, feeding your dog. or you cripple the progress of the party given how important chain bonuses were. Again, this is old. This doesn't matter anymore. None of this stuff represents Pagos anymore. But tiring on the hands and very little progress made for the amount of time it put in. Not to mention, you just didn't get anything. There was no armor in Pagos that was relevant. There was like the speed belt, which has like a 1% drop rate. And now there's not even going to be belts in the fucking game anymore, so who cares? There's the Cassie earring, probably 1% drop rate as well, or some stuff like that. And yeah, it all culminated into this very underwhelming experience. Now, fortunately, if you go through it nowadays, it's pretty easy. It's easy to lose interest in, as you've learned as well, but it's also much, much easier to get through. You can play it a lot more like you do Automos, and you should be okay getting around the maps a little bit easier. You still have to know the different aggro types, where to fall down off the ledges, how to spawn notorious monsters, but the same kind of things you need to know for Automos, just with a little bit more tedium, but not a whole lot compared to before. So that major issue that I had specifically was the sheer amount of input, the sheer amount of effort put forth for so little progress. I think it works better in older games because you don't have to provide as many inputs. You can let Final Fantasy XI is the most direct example, since Eureka was not modeled off of it, but it was meant as sort of a semi-homage to Final Fantasy XI, where, you can auto-attack for a few skills, do a weapon skill, and then auto-attack for a few skills, then do a weapon skill. And it's very low stress, Maybe you cast a spell here, maybe you're the healer and you got to heal the tank, or maybe an AoE went off, but it's overall so much less stressful on the number of inputs you put in, that it's easier to grind for longer periods of time than Pagos was. So that was my most major issue with Pagos, which is not representative of it anymore. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, my boy, ¿cómo estás? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I've been enjoying the hell out of Monster Hunter Rise, as I'm sure you have. I don't know why I couldn't read that. I was like, as I'm sure you have, and I was like, as you're... What? Been a hammer main since way back in the day. High five. There you go. My question is simple. Which has been your favorite or least favorite monster for this one? I found myself farming Raijin out of pure love. Definitely feels way more fun. Yeah, I don't really mind Raijin in Rise. He's not a favorite, but I definitely wouldn't say he's not the devil, or at least not yet. He's not the devil that we expected of him. Man, that's actually kind of tough. I think I like the variety of them so far in Rise comparatively. I like that I'm not just fighting 4 Elder Dragons like over and over again, like I did with like Val and Telostra and all that. But if for a favorite, I gotta say Nargacuga. And I think my least favorite is Bosiros. Bosiros, I think, is my least favorite. It's just not fun. Like, nothing about Bosiros is fun. I can't stand him. But yeah, I think my favorite is Nargacuga. He pisses me off as a hammer main, but that's why I like him. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hope you're doing well. Hope the same for you. I noticed in the patch notes they use the word or instead of and when talking about the upgrade tokens for tome gear from Nier. Odds are that's a typo. Is there any way they can make that not complete? I'm sorry, without any of the context, I have no idea what you're talking about. They're basically saying with Nier, every week you're going to get 3 coins total if you want to get a single piece. Because you only get 1 coin per week from the most recent tier. So even if you stocked up 1 million coins from the old ones, every week you're going to have to pick. And you're only going to be able to pick one of the Tombstone upgrade materials. You're not going to get to pick... You're not going to get to pick more than one. That's why it says or instead of and, if I'm even understanding the question correctly. I'm not going to lie, I don't give a shit, though, because I use the hunt for upgrade tokens because I can just farm as many seals as I want every week and just buy my upgrade mats as many as I want. So I'm not going to touch the Nier raid after the first one. I might have to do it a couple times to make the video. I'm going to see how much of... We'll see, because I probably won't want to. Well, outside unless they make me for the weekly quest, which they probably will. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hi there, Haps. Hello. I have a quick question. Yeah, I can tell it's not so much text here. I feel like you have a lot of experience over. I'm currently in the middle of planning a 14 complete walkthrough, including information of all the jobs, important quests, and fun minor details that some players may have missed. Just wanted to ask you what possible roadblocks I need to be aware of to keep the walkthrough interesting. So I'm gonna level with you. The biggest roadblock is gonna be yourself. Now I'm not saying you in particular. I'm saying that your breadth of knowledge and experience with things will always be the biggest roadblock. It's very easy to take what other people say and to try and regurgitate it. It's what I've tried to do while pointing people into the right direction when it comes to information about especially a lot of specific jobs. You try to pick up on the things that are generally considered norms and also form your own opinions. Like, for example, me stating that Astro has always been about pulling the balance, and they've essentially made every card the balance. So that's why I like current Astro better, because they just eliminated all the bullshit that the job had before that people don't want to admit there actually was. That's me taking what they've factually done to the job and inserting my opinion into it. Now, does that make me an Astro expert? Does that mean I could give someone Astro advice? No, and that's the roadblock, in that I've only managed to form an opinion based on what is common knowledge. So, as much as you are worried about the game and any roadblocks that you might hit, you are always going to be the funnel with which the information has to find its way through. And if you don't understand the things that you're talking about, then it's going to get very difficult after a short period of time for you to keep things interesting in a situation like this. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it. People are always around to correct people if they make small mistakes or slip-ups. And 14 community most of the time is pretty good with that, doing that in a mature and informative way. Like, just so you know, yada, 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 works like this. It actually does this or that. I see it in videos of mine when I make mistakes. And people are usually really good about it in the comment section. So maybe one person always who's like, you know, you got to relax a little bit there, buddy. But most of the time, it's people being willing to do that. And they are very largely going to be the megaphone that fixes those problems for you. You have to also be okay with that. So I don't know what your overall experience is. I don't know what your overall breadth of knowledge is. So all I can say is keep that in mind when you say something, when you present something, and when you want to include something. That's it. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello and good day to you too. How do you deal with being asked the same question over and over? What do you think of this game? I can't imagine how annoying it must be knowing they aren't doing it maliciously. Well, I mean, you've just hit the nail on the head. Most people are not doing it maliciously. It's just about, I basically, I upload a thought into my brain, right? And it sits there, and then when someone asks the question, I download it out of my mouth. That's about the best that I can possibly do. Now, it depends on how the person's, because sometimes people aren't asking maliciously, but they naturally ask it aggressively, I suppose. Like, if somebody's like, hey, bruh, what you think of this game? It worth getting? And I'm like, yes. I'll just answer, sure. That's it. Because I feel like I don't know how I'm being approached in that manner. I'm like, what am I to you? It's like super confusing when people try to present. And then you have like the normal, like, hey man, how's it going? Like, I was wondering, how is this game doing right now? And then that I'm always like, yeah, the game's doing great. It's always growing. And there's a free trial up to level 60. So you don't even have to buy the game if you want to try it out. And that's honestly, that's the biggest answer. Getting people right to the free trial. If people have questions, they're new to the game, is it worth playing, all that, send them right to the free trial. Don't even ask any questions. Just tell them, listen, here's the free trial. If you have any questions about like what class to play or whatnot, I've got a few different answers, but that's going to just play it and you'll know whether or not you like it. As for asking, other than that, like on these weekly Q&As, I get asked the same question over and over. Most of the time, it just means that I'll throw it in the lightning round. I'll be like, I've answered this a bunch in recent weeks. I'll do a very quick answer and move on with my life because it's worth remembering. It's not malicious. You have to remember that. And besides, like 99% of life and like the jobs and people and working with people that you'll do, you'll get asked the same question a million times. I worked in IT. You know how many times I got asked a question that I've been asked a million times and I just had to tell them, have you tried turning it off and on again? And that'll be the answer. So trust me, I've had a great many years to test my patience. Not to mention being the only tech-savvy person in a family of not tech-savvy people and being the family fixer-upper when it comes to their computers and whatnot. I've heard some pretty dumb questions from within my own family, and that helps a lot, too, with protecting my sanity. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hello. 2 quick questions. Sure, they are. They look very small questions. 1, do you think they'll ever implement a limited job roulette? Well, there's only one job, and no. It's the same problem with like Palace of the Dead and honestly even DR Normal, where people could just show up with only water cannon and nobody could be willing to tank. Especially when it comes to Blue Mage, because you really need the like tank, healer, and DPS mimicries to like define your role. And some people don't even show up. People show up without mimicries anyway. Like, it's going to be a shit show. So no, I don't think they ever will. 2, in your opinion, which raid was harder, DR Savage or Baldesion? I don't think it's in my opinion. I think it is a fact that DR Savage is more difficult than Baldesion Arsenal. Slimes alone was more difficult prog than 99% of DR Savage. The duel is more difficult. I'm sorry, than Baldesion Arsenal. DR Savage was 99% more difficult than Baldesion. The hardest boss in Baldesion is Ozma, and it's barely more difficult than a 24-man boss. It's just the risk of dying makes people extremely nervous for whatever reason. In DR Savage, people were less afraid of dying. They were just very actively trying not to, because you could at least go through a bunch of arises and healer LB3s and things like that. And the fights are a lot closer to like an extreme trial difficulty, so it's a lot more fun. But it's also a lot more exacting. The amount of actions and the amount of very specific things you have to do in DR Savage is way higher. BA is fucking easy mode. I like to compare BA and DR Savage to like Coil versus Gordius, with DR Savage being much less shitty than Gordius was when it released. So that's the comparison I like to make, if that makes sense to you. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hello. You've wanted Gil Syncs for a long time. Now we're getting 2. Yeah, and I'm probably not even going to be that much of a sync, to be honest. But I have to ask, what do they accomplish? Obviously, they delete Gil, but what effect does that have on the game? And then there's a second question, but let me answer that one first. So let's put it this way. When Gil circulates between players, that's all it's doing. It's not disappearing. It's not going anywhere. It's permanently in the market. Now, as more and more of that gets injected into the market, it creates inflation. And as long as there's nothing to reduce the amount and it just keeps increasing, that's going to happen over and over again. Everything that the players use for each other, as long as there is some sort of demand for it, will continue to get more and more expensive. Now, we happen to live in a very fortunate situation where there's not a lot of demand for items that cost Gil. Housing items are probably the most supply-demand market. That's long-term. There's a ton of short-term supply and demand markets, and some that stay relatively consistent. But it essentially means that the value of an individual piece of Gil just keeps going down. So it ends up, you need more and more and more of it to do anything reasonable. This is actually a much bigger problem in Final Fantasy XI, where for a very long time there was a huge inflation of Gil, and the demand for everything was still really high. So items that, like when I was playing, for example, maybe went for 4 or 5 million. Now there's equivalents of them that are level 99 that are like up to date, that are literally 150 million, and that's a drop in the bucket for people. And that's something I really want to avoid with 14. That's only been avoided because there hasn't been a demand for anything. That's not a good thing, by the way, but I'd rather get a stranglehold on the issue of Gil inflation by adding Gil Syncs, rather than trying to just reduce the amount of Gil that's being put into the market, making sure there are literally options where players can go and just drop a bunch of Gil into a bottomless void, like these new mounts will be, that removes it from the market so that the inflation doesn't get out of control. So we'll see if that actually ends up happening. With this is not nearly enough to do that. I think there's a whole lot of other steps they would need to take. But again, as long as there's not any major in-demand items, it's never going to really be that urgent of a problem. Quite frankly, I just want to drop some money on something and have a reason to actually farm Gil as someone who has 230 million Gil and has no reason to have it. There's also a second question here of what's your opinion on the split 0.5 patches? I get they're meant to make the expansion release wait time more bearable. That's not really why they're there, because we have 0.5 patches for everything. For every patch, there's a 0.1, a point X1, a point X5. So the 0.5 patch is far from the only patch that's split. In fact, if anything, it's probably the least split patch. It's part of the MSQ and Save the Queen, and there's really nothing else that's split at this point. So I am personally a fan. If you're specifically talking about the MSQ, I'll give you that side of the opinion. I would really prefer to have it all at once, because when we did 2.5, they actually made 2 full story patches for each part. And that was really cool, because we had a huge progression on the first one, and then really the propulsion to the expansion was fully set in place in the second part. Now they actually just take 1 patch's worth of story and split it in 2, and that does what you said. It kind of draws out the expansion hype, gives players something closer to the expansion itself that is more climactic, so it doesn't feel like you're going from this, you're having as huge of a dry period as you realistically are. But I specifically, the MSQ would prefer if they don't split it. now that since they've only been doing since 3.5, one story patch split in two instead of two full story patches. So I would rather they not make us wait anymore. All right, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hi, hey, first time asker, welcome. Long time watcher, welcome. Well, thank you, I guess, but welcome to the video. I just watched the new 5.5 trailer and saw that there seemed to be some new, Garlean in the new MSQ dungeon with Keeper of the Lake, Baelsars, and Gimlet. This will be the fourth time an expansion ends with a Garlean. A Garlier? Is this, I'm just going to assume English, not the first language. Garlean related dungeon. That's part of the MSQ. Do you think that's intentional? I do actually think it's fully intentional. Garlemald has literally been the overarching major problem that has rooted itself as an evil throughout all of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, obviously, in recent years, we've learned that that's very much by design. It's by Ascian design. And they've created just this spider web of, this infection of this entire empire across all facets of the world as we've come to know it. And so the fact that we always get something Garlean related, the Garleans are interested in, picking apart things from the Agrius. Midgard's armor, the Keeper of the Lake, crashed to the ground in the Agrius, taking down the Agrius. So them being there, picking apart different parts of the ship that they can use for something else makes perfect sense. And it's very much a reminder of their everlasting presence, even though we're going to deal with Ishgard after this. For 3.5, we were charging headfirst into a direct war with the 12th Legion. And that is very much a fitting thing for that as well, because we were actually going into Stormblood, which was largely about the conflict between Alamigo and Doma and the 12th Legion itself. And then we go into 5.0, where we, right before 5.0, we learn who Solace actually was, and we dive into the history of the Ascians, but the damage they've dealt is still very real back on the source. And we're seeing some of the machinations of their influence throughout the years really perpetuate. Now, I will say that specifically with this dungeon, we are going to Pagel Thon, which is actually the homeland of the Amalja. They are nomadic tribes, so it's a relatively large area, so we will be having some of the dungeon take place in Zulmak, their actual capital, as like Zelfatol was for the Ixals. But you can also see the nomadic tribes. It's really only Garlean-esque because of Xenos and Fandaniel. You got to remember that those towers, we've been told, are Garlean tech. And they very likely, the Garleans were the first types of people exposed to the magics that influence them. And so they will very likely be a centerpiece. Some tempered Garleans will very likely be a centerpiece for protecting those towers and keeping us out of those towers. Whether or not it's their own will is kind of irrelevant. So it's very fitting, and I think it is definitely on purpose that the Garleans have been perpetually this, we've been reminded of them at the end of every expansion. There's a hashtag there, but it's off screen. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello, good day to you. Third time asking a question. We're keeping track now. All right. What are your thoughts on the Bozja area in the upcoming Zadnor? It seems like Zadnor will be like a barren area like Bozja. It seems some people think of it as SE being lazy in terms of design. No, there's a lot of lore behind Bozja that definitely explains a little bit more. Bozja itself was designed a lot more like World War II-esque. It's got its trenches. It's got that greenish brown, very gritty aesthetic to it, which I actually love because it's so fitting to a World War II aesthetic. Whereas Zadnor is a lot more fantasy-esque. You can see that there appears to be amassings of ether at this border between Zadnor and Dalmasca, which is largely unexplained, but is fitting to the Save the Queen series. The Save the Queen itself is being used to do primal summonings. That was a big thing of Delubrum, was finding a crystal that could be a perpetual energy source for the Save the Queen, as it was just constantly draining ether every time they went to temper somebody or she wanted to transform or anything along those lines. And this now appears to be another location of high density ether that they want to use the Save the Queen for. And it makes sense given Ethis told us about that Zadnor was actually a capital or a center. I guess a capital or a city that was built as a centerpiece to between two lands in the UK, ages and ages ago, that was basically meant to be the center point for an empire. And that's very fitting to what Gabranth is trying to do. So I'm curious to see how much ether is really present in the land there, because it seems it's like split and there's rocks floating everywhere, and that's very indicative of wind ether being incredibly present. There's probably other forms of ether there as well. I'm super invested in it. I don't think it looks lazy. I think it looks much more fantasy-esque, way less green and brown than that World War II aesthetic of Bozja, and I can't wait to see the actual whole thing and why this is the centerpiece for Gabranth's empire, why he wants it to be. All right, we're actually getting I've got a lot of questions that are going to the lightning round, in case you're wondering. And also correction, it was Dalriada. That was that centerpiece that I was talking about, not Zadnor, but that is the centerpiece. That is the airship and whatever it's resting atop of, I believe. So I might just make this the last one and then lightning round everything else. So just so you're aware. So anyway, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Happy. I don't know if you watch it, but Ori, great guy, recorded one of his streams a couple months ago where he ranked all the Savage fights of this expansion. Yeah, I've been thinking about doing that video. So this might consider this, if I do that video, a light version of that video. Well, as a side, I was curious if you agree with most of his placements, and specifically his placing E8 Savage at the top. I know there's a lot of disagreement between E8 and E12, but I found E12 Phase 1 to be top notch. I agree, but Phase 2 to be a massive letdown. I don't entirely agree. Once the puzzle is solved, the hardest thing to do is that 9-minute encounter is triple APOC. Really? Triple? You're not a tank then, because double APOC is a nightmare. I always think it's, what's it called? The very first mechanic. The very first, what is it called? Because I'm so used to talking about double and triple APOC that I always forget about the singularities. Advanced, intermediate. Yeah, those ones. The very first one, though. I can't remember what it's called. E8 Savage, on the other hand, stands out to me as the most well-designed fight. I'm also curious if you think it was well-designed as a Savage fight and then scaled down to normal mode. Can't wait for Ock Morning's interview with the developers for Promise, but I'm curious if E12 Part 1 was also developed first and then scaled down. Honestly, that's how they design most Savage fights. They almost never design the normal mode first and then build on it. That's way harder to do. So I guarantee you, I guess I can't say that. I would be surprised if not every encounter was designed Savage first and then elements of it taken away. I feel like that's even just looking back, let's look back at Stormblood. Kefka. There's no way they made normal mode first. They're not just make the part for the first few parts of Dancing Mad. We'll worry about the last part later. They definitely worked from more difficult and trickled down. Definitely the way they do the majority of their raids. And they've acknowledged as such in previous raid tiers before. It's tough. It is actually tough. I do agree that E8 and E12 are at the top. I think E8, people who say E8 isn't designed well, I think the only thing that isn't designed well is the feedback of failure on Light Rampant. And in any of the times where that appears. Basically that and Icelit Dragon Song. And that's just because it just becomes just a mush of light on the screen. Just explosions, the sounds of chains. It's very hard to really nail down exactly what went wrong unless you know exactly what to be looking for. And that feedback loop is not satisfying as a player who is progressing it. It just isn't. All you know is you've lost, go again. And I don't like that. Whereas E12, I love Phase 1. I actually think Phase 2 is very, very well done. Both in the way of the healing check in Phase 1 and Phase 2, the positional checks with the different APOCs, first, second, and third, are all very, in my opinion, masterfully done. And all of the, what are they called? It's really bugging me. The first, this is Singularity? It's not Singularity. It's, the word is on the tip of my fucking tongue, and I couldn't get it. I think all of them are beautiful to look at. They're so aesthetically satisfying. It's really weird having 2 9-minute encounters, though, and not really having, I still think the best way to do a door boss is X-Death. A 4 to 5 minute roughly door boss followed by a 12-minute boss, like 12-minute actual boss. That will always be for me the master design, and not just because it was first. I do genuinely think it is the best way to go about doing the door boss. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't like E12, both halves of it. So, man, I wouldn't say I disagree with him. I'd say that they're so close for me that I'd really need to sit down and think about it. Because I could go either way on E8 or E12 being at the top as well. All right, so like I said, there are actually a ton of remaining questions for the lightning round. Some of them just comments about stuff from last week. That's always super normal. Someone else asking for Healer Happy. A few comments on veteran rewards, so that's fairly normal. The question of the date of 5.55. What else did we have here? That's the Pagos question. ¿Cómo estás? I remember answering that one. Just acknowledging my monk comment from last week. Are there any changes to job aesthetics you'd like to see come 6.0 with weapon skills and abilities? I always like to see when they do updated, like, animations and stuff, but there's also, we've lost great animations in the process, dude. I will always want wide volley back, and I'll always feel for people who want various other skills back just for their animations. I mean, I miss Butcher's Block animation big time as another example. So less of updated or changes to job aesthetics, but more looking back at what were really popular aesthetics that have since been shifted away from, reincorporating some of those in a more fun and up-to-date manner, so we can get some of our really, really cool stuff back. And then, of course, thematically, you say stuff like using the scabbard more on samurai and not just it being sheathed so they can do AI jutsu. Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. Like, I think I'm always open to seeing really, really great ideas like that. But I guess because I'm only thinking of the jobs that I really play and the ones I'll see the most, that alone gives me a very narrow list to work with. Somebody said, a lot more people have been playing Blue Mage, but there hasn't really been much added to it since it released. They've largely focused on trying to make it so Blue Mage has like phases of its existence. So when it came out, it was largely about completing the Masked Carnival. The second update was largely about the Savage Raids. The third update expanded on the Savage Raids, but also made sure they were a little bit more of a solo powerhouse like people initially expected, which was a huge thing that was feedback that they got from the level 60 level cap of it. So we've seen it released in phases, but I agree. My number one ask, I want Palace of the Dead with Blue Mage, but I want a specific Palace of the Dead for Blue Mage. So they start with just Water Cannon, and they have to go through and learn the abilities inside of Palace in order to get through. So they can choose to take longer and stop and try to learn spells, or they can take what they have to say, hey, this is enough, and try to work through the rest of the tower as it is. Very much like other roguelites that we have in the industry right now, where sometimes it's like, do you really want to stop and try to get everything, or do you want to just try to get what's necessary, what you deem is necessary to actually make it all the way through to the end? That's the one Blue Mage ask I think I have above all else. There was another one here that didn't have a hashtag. People talking about how sometimes people are just upset about changes. Yeah, people are always afraid of change. Sometimes it ends up being something they're afraid of and they like it, and sometimes it's justified. It's a gamble every time because you're trying to do something that's fresh and new without alienating the people who liked it exactly as it was. So it's definitely really tough. Healers are getting gutted in how they aren't playing those classes anymore. I don't know. For me, I don't think it's really fair for me to. I think I mentioned this last week where it's not super fair for me to comment on healers because I don't main them. Because the way I look at it is, I can play White Mage and, I'll glare and I'll optimize my OG CDs. And maybe if I have movement, I'll think about, where my Dia timer is or where my, how many afflatus I have and if anyone's missing HP and yada, yada, yada. And I look at that and I'm like, there's a lot of great decision making here, but that eventually boils down to how can I spam glare more? It kind of ends up the same with Scholar. I think about where my pets will go, where can I, expand a shield onto the whole party that will help with the next mechanic, like an emerald weapon at the very start. And, but that always boils down to how can I get more broils and do I need to use energy drain? Can I fit an energy drain or do I want to save like for a soil or something? For me, because I don't main it, that's like a good amount of decision making that as much as it boils down to one simple thing of trying to spam your DPS ability. Whereas for dedicated healers, it's like, well, I can do all that shit. That shit's second nature. So now I'm just spamming broil and I don't like it. So it never really feels great, but I will say that giving healers a full rotation is never going to happen again. Not unless it's key to unlocking their healing potential. So like if you have to like finish, like if a healer got a combo and at the end of the combo, you got your job resource and then that job resource could be used offensively or defensively, similar to Etherflow. That might be the only way you ever see it because then they're going to be trying to encourage you to follow through either on a healing combo or on a DPS combo in order to achieve this end goal. And that's the biggest thing for me is how do you access your power? That's always the thing Final Fantasy is looking to use to separate its jobs as opposed to giving them too many fundamental differences to the point where they're difficult to balance. So that's real tough. But they're always going to be retooling, reworking, rescaling, refreshing jobs. And some people are going to be happy sometimes and they're not going to be happy other times. It's always going to happen. And it's just a matter of, if there's a change that's a breaking point or if there's changes that end up making you fall in love with something for the first time. Sometimes it could just be the aesthetic of something that makes you fall in love with it, and you don't even really think about how it plays much anymore. There was a question about whether or not they'd let you queue as multiple roles, or to try and see which instance it is showing you what roles are queued for, which is, I had a really hard time understanding the question, because it was, when queuing for multiple instances, is there any way to see which instance it is showing what roles are queued for which instance? That was the most confusing thing I've read. Because I think I know what you're asking. You do even give examples for it. There's the answer. So I'm pretty sure the answer to your question is just no. And I'm not even saying it like facetiously or like I don't get it, so I'm just going to say no. I think I understand the question. With your example, I think the answer is no. There's no way to know what instance you are queued for at any given time and exactly what roles are queued for it. It updates occasionally, but that's why you can have like 4 people show and then instantly you're at 24. Because it's only giving you the information at set periods of time when it's relevant or when it's fully complete. So no, I'm just going to answer no because I think that's the correct answer. That's the best way I could think to put it. There was a first-time asker that asked if we want more crossover events. I would take a world where we never get another crossover event. If we have to have them, I just don't want them to be like Nier. I will take even Yokai Watch. I will take the Monster Hunter collab. I'll take the 15 collab. I'll take collabs like that. Just never a full expansion's worth of Alliance raids for your collaboration ever again. I don't care how much. I don't care if it's Devil May Cry, one of my favorite franchise. I don't want that even to be an Alliance raid. If you did it once and it was cool, move on. That's it. So no. I kind of just want another Monster Hunter. If they're gonna do another, Rise just came out. Just do another Monster Hunter one. Sure, why not? There is a question, do you think the PS4 is holding the game back? No. So the PS3 was holding the game back because they literally couldn't do things. Because it didn't even, what is it? It had like, not onboard graphics, onboard CPU. It had no RAM, I think is what it was. It was basically missing a hardware component that the PS4 and all PCs have, and I think it was RAM. And so they needed to make everything playable on the PS3, and that was horrible. The PS4 is largely about like graphics and load times. That's really the only thing it super holds back. There are definitely some other technical things that are harder to do on the PS4 than on a PC or on the PS5, but I don't think they're so major that they don't boil down to mostly a graphical difference. Now, that's not to say that they'll support it perpetually, but it will be around for quite some time. And I don't think it's urgent that they get rid of the PS4. I think they could go for several years still having the PS4 and not really worry about it. Honestly, DX9 was a bigger problem than the PS4 was. And I don't think the PS4 is even close to being the same amount of problems as DX9 was. Okay, that's the complete walkthrough. Answering the same question over and over again. Anima, there was the one about Anima asked, do I think she'll be a trial? Yeah, they said she would be a trial. They pretty much said she would be a trial at the FanFest. That's why I saved that one for the lightning round. What patch do you think will make the Time Worn artifacts doing solo play? So solo Palace of the Dead is how you would earn Time Worns doing solo, not Delubrum. And I think what they'll do is they'll either increase the drop rate to 100% in Palace of the Dead, 51 plus, or they'll make it so when you do get one, you get like 3. And they'll probably buff the drop rate even if they did that anyway. So yeah, they'll eventually just make the Palace of the Dead method faster. And honestly, I think that'll come by the end of May. I don't even think it'll take that long before Time Worn's going to buff. I think they'll make it so Delubrum drops 5 of them, and Palace of the Dead is 100% drop rate on floors 51 and above. I feel confident they'll do something like that for Time Worns in the next 2 months. Do you think they'll ever squish the city-state maps from 2 maps down to 1? No. So there is a technical issue with that because it's designed like that from the ground up. The amount of work it would take, including graphical work, to fill in the dead zones in between. I know it doesn't look like there's a lot of dead zones, but the way the zones are designed to flow into one another is not crisp. There's basically things that need to be completely animated, or so similar to why they said it would take forever to get flying in A Realm Reborn, or we might never have it. It's kind of the same issue with splitting the maps in 2. But the bigger issue is definitely combining the 2 zones into one data-wise and connecting it, still having it connected to everything else in the game. There's massive technical issues that would come with that. Not insurmountable, mind you, but not worth the effort, more so than anything else. There's the Gil Sync question again, the 5.5 trailer with the Garleans, right? Why do you think tanks have dungeon and raid achievements, but healers don't? I honestly agree. And I don't agree. I think they've been asked that, and they said, well, they have a unicorn. I'm like, no, that doesn't. I agree. They should absolutely have it. So that's the answer to that question. Lifetime, my question you missed first, your reward a lifetime of supply of Lalafels. I don't want that. Do you think, what do you think the DPS will be? I think it's pointless to guess the new DPS. I think it's completely pointless. Because here's the thing, even if you guessed Sage for a healer, you were wrong. You didn't guess no fucking Gundam funnel-wielding healer Sage. You didn't guess that. You're full of shit. Not you. I'm saying, like, generally to anyone who is saying they guessed correctly, you're full of shit. And so I think the same is going to happen here. I think even if you can kind of get the weapon or the theme, it's going to be a lot like Gunbreaker, where nobody could get the name. Maybe somebody will. Maybe somebody will just throw a dart at a dartboard, but quite frankly, it'll be someone who nobody knew what their guess was, and they could be full of shit. So no one will believe them anyway. So that's all there is. Somebody asking if they can reduce or increase the amount of nuts that we can hold. I guess you should have asked if we can increase the amount of any of the hunt currencies, because they all cap at 4K. No, but I think it would be nice if you could buy a certificate with hunt currencies that's worth a certain amount of hunt currency. So you could basically store more than the 4,000 away. So like buy like a certificate of nuttiness. I don't know. That's worth 500 nuts. It costs 500 nuts. It's worth, when you exchange it, it's worth 500 nuts. So you can essentially store over the 4,000 cap. I'm sure there's issues in terms of data, storing it in the currency menu, and I guess maximum values that are allowed. And they're probably like stretching their limit on it. It's the same stuff we hear about generally whenever we want to make additions to numbers, especially. So I'd assume that there's a big reason. That's a big reason why. Okay. That's the Ore question. Hopefully, I can't find it. Do you know if the upcoming PS5 version will get the official DualSense support on PC? I think it says it won't. I'm pretty sure it says it won't in the patch notes. So, oh, there you go. Yeah, you even acknowledged that. Okay, perfect. That might be why I skipped it the first time. There was a question from a week 1 high-end monk, Sam. Curious your thoughts on monk, whether or not you believe the foundation could improve. No, I don't think the foundation could improve. I think the job could improve. I think that having played it a little bit since it was reworked, I actually played it fairly significantly. I just didn't play it in any super high-end content. I felt like it flows really well now. The biggest thing for me was that as long as I'm sitting between 1.94 and 1.96 in terms of my GCD, I find that my next burst window actually does come up at the complete perfect time in a full uptime scenario with... all of my, like I'm getting to the right GCD that leads into my burst window as my burst window is coming up. That was my experience with it when I was between that GCD. And quite frankly, when it doesn't, when there's like forced downtime, it's pretty easy on Monk to just get into it. You might take like 2 or 3 GCDs to get into it, but that's fine. Everyone else is very likely doing the same thing to get into their own burst windows as well. And finally, Monk's access to their burst is just a matter of how aware of the job you really are. And I think that's a great way to have it. Just a matter of building on that, because it's back to being very plain. It's the Monk that I always loved, but I know that doesn't excite people as much as it used to anymore. So as long as they don't fuck it up again, then I will actually be okay with it. Your issue seems to be more with skill speed and spell speed in general, which is an issue that extends past Monk, and that you have to have very exact skill speeds and spell speeds, or a lot of things don't work. So I really can't fault Monk for that, because it's just an issue that's not the only job that deals with that issue. There was another person with the hashtag who asked if you're unable to use a Grand Company Glamour if you change Grand Companies. Yes, I'm pretty certain that is indeed the case. Deliberum Savage, what's the best way to get a team? There's Discords for that. I can't point you to the correct one because I don't know what data center you're on, but there's different Deliberum Savage Discords for different data centers. So you try to do some research into that. And what are you most excited for in the new patch? The ocean fishing. Dolphins and seagulls. Because I got a lot of points to go still, and I'm worried. Question about White Mage for Levy Unreal. Use the size on cooldown, the skill that didn't exist. Yeah, you're going to get damage reflected on you if that's what you're concerned about. I don't think abilities trigger the mirror, which seems to be the primary point of your question. I'm pretty sure it has to be a spell that triggers the mirror. Yeah, I'm almost positive that that's the case. There's 2 comments. Maybe somebody adds to that. A size isn't a spell. Yeah, so yeah, the bigger problem is the reflect damage. Yeah. So, and I'm not worried about that. Quite frankly, I'm going to shield myself every time I assign. So I'm going to give myself a shield on White Mage every single time I assign. So I'm going to be extra greedy with that. And I'm also going to be regenning myself and dotting both parts. I am I am going to grief myself to death at some point on Leviathan Unreal. 100%. Do you ever see them going away from the 0.55 patch? And yeah, I skipped this because I answered the how do you feel about the split, but they also had 4 questions, so I was like, yeah, I don't have time for that. No, I think 0.5 will always be the end. I think if anything, they would add more, like a 0.6 or a 0.7, but I think they've found their rhythm with 0.5, and I don't suspect that's going to change. New melee be teased in 5.5. Yeah, it should be, but in 5.5 part 2, it should be teased, at which point we'll already know what it is. Probably not in part 1. Endwalker is 4 base. Do you think either the Mage Sisters or the 4 Archfiends? I'm hoping the Trial Series is the 4 Archfiends, but more directly, in artwork, we already see the Mage Sisters, actually. They are present and what looks to be engraved in one of the towers. It's very likely we will actually see the Mage Sisters in one of the dungeons. Or as a trial. One of the two. They're definitely already present in some of the artwork. Tiamat, do you think they ever make the 3 elemental bosses from Final Fantasy 1? I think they would choose a different name if they decided to use the original 4 Archfiends from Final Fantasy 1. Because they're all kind of very super generic names, and it's kind of boring, I'm not going to lie. So I think the Final Fantasy 4 Archfiends are going to be the way they go, but if they did want to revisit the Final Fantasy 1 Archfiends, I don't think they would struggle that hard with it. I think they would just change Tiamat's name, or, I mean, we're going to have a second Cuchulainn with Zadnor, so who cares, right? You know, or they can Phlegathon it. I don't know. They got options. Make Aetheryte tickets work autumn. Oh yeah, how did I forget about that with that question last week? Yeah, Aetheryte tickets, add a tick box so you can say, "Don't ask me this again. Just do it automatic." Hell yeah, yeah. All right. There was another one. What do you think of Loot Master? I don't trust anyone. Loot Master is okay in statics. I've had statics that use Loot Master to make sure that nothing hits the ground. They give it to somebody. They're not like, oh, you rolled and I left the instance and then it hit the ground because it got all fucked up. No, I've been in statics. They use Loot Master to make sure that doesn't happen. In Party Finder, that shit's a trap. Don't ever do it. That's all I have to say about that. What are your top 3 games to crossover events? This is like the other crossover. I don't have favorites that I would want. I just don't want crossover events. If I had to choose between having all of my favorite games be crossover events and never having another crossover event again, I choose never to have a crossover event ever again. I know they're cool. They're really fun for fans of different franchises, but I find often they're either half-assed or they're intrusive. Monster Hunter's really the number one that we've had, and I feel like that's because they put their best foot forward. There's a lot of effort, but there's also a lot of effort that went into Nier. And we know how I feel about that. Let's see. There was oh my god. This one I skipped because it's quite literally a thesis. An elaboration. I find difficult encounters 14. Okay, there is a TLDR. I love you for this. Find difficult encounters in 14 difficult to approach. The means by which getting into the encounter requiring pre-maze. Why is the dev team designing difficult encounters that dissuades Duty Finder? So in Japan, they actually use the Raid Finder for clears. That's how they do it. They practice in the Party Finder, and they use the Raid Finder for re-clears. So, quite frankly, to them, it looks like it's working just fine. So, it's only us over here in the West that are so adverse to people learning and accepting that people are not perfect. And that's a problem with us and not so much a problem with them. It's also an MMO, so I think the idea of being social to get into multiplayer encounters, whether it be with friends you've developed over time or like-minded individuals who you're just meeting for the first time, that they expect people will be capable and will weed out the people who are really, really obnoxious on their own. That's how I'd like to imagine it, at the very least. Let's see. There's somebody who was worth my time to ask for the ability animation glamours. No, we've actually had this discussion before. I think ever since they had the green flames for Fel, I actually asked Yoshi P about this in my JP FanFest interview, I think, if not an earlier interview, where I said, have you ever considered like making it so wearing a set of armor maybe changes the animation for a skill? I asked that. And they said they were worried about trying to force people into wearing entire sets. But the idea of animation glamour, I mean, Eggy Glamour has been on the table for how long? And we still don't have it? Yeah, I'm not too optimistic. Let's put it that way. Okay, that's it. Let's see. Funny to talk about wallet shortcuts. Proceed to drop hundreds of dollars in Genshin. Hey, I haven't spent any money on Genshin, and more people donate money for me to do pulls in Genshin than I've done. I haven't spent on Genshin other than Welkins or what is it? Battle Pass in like since November, I think, since the Zhongli banner, because I've just been saving. That's it. It's just been a pile up ever since then of like 77,000 gems that I have now. And also, I like to gamble. I would 100% run a slot machine live stream if I could at some point. I love watching Big John over on Twitch whenever he does his Bitcoin slot machines. I love that. Best of wishes to him. He's going through some stuff right now, so big shout out to Big John. So yeah, no, I haven't done that in a while. That's gotchas in general, bro. Every gotcha person saw that and went, no. Meanwhile, let me open up Fate real quick. They don't need to know about this. There we go. Chat channels, quality of life. Being a veteran is a reward in and of itself. No, it isn't. In an MMO, let me tell you. No, it isn't. Oh, man. And then the rest of these are as like a high and smaller stack of items than a cheaper stack of 99. There's the Omega. That's the Omega person's back. I like how my YouTube channel puts... So I have it automatically sorted by relevance, and it puts this one at the bottom. I love it. In fact, the last few I read are at the bottom. Oh, man. Okay. All right. Oh, this one's fun. Let's see. You're being hyperbolic with the near rate. It has been great. No, it hasn't. You're not progressing near every week. It's just for fun and gear. It's cool. You hate it and people parrot you too. Anyone who thinks that, I think Ethis said it on State of the Realm, that if anyone thinks that we have enough sway over people's free will, as Ethis put it, I'm flattered. Because I forgot. I brought this up. Somebody told me about this before State of the Realm, and I brought it up to Ethis, and he was like, that's flattering. And somebody's complaining how much time is set aside. Listen, it's my video. I'll do whatever I want. That's the bottom line. People ask me about it. I present them what I think about it. That's kind of the whole point of the video and the podcast and everything. So it's weird to complain about that because you're in my territory. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode. I figured it would be funnier since they were annoyed by me adding time to it to throw like a couple minutes at the end. Especially because this video is almost an hour. So, there you go. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. A busy one, to say the least. I'll see you for the patch. It's going to be busy. This week is also actually going to be... All my videos are going to be sponsored this week by Opera Omnia. Not this one, but all the ones after the patch come out are going to be sponsored by Opera Omnia. So you're going to get a lot of sponsored things. But we love working with Opera Omnia because I do play it on my own time. Whenever I do have time, which hasn't been as of late. And so that's always a good time. So heads up on that. There is going to be a sponsored bit at the start of pretty much every video for like a week or so, and including State of the Realm. Well, not every video, but like one, at least like a handful. Most of them. I'll just say all of them. Fuck it. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Ask your question for next week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy, and I'll see you guys then. Until then, bye.